Let's bring in our panel right now. With us here in studio today, we have former state party chair for the Indiana Democrats, Robin Winston, former vice chair for the Indiana Trump campaign in 2016, Tony Samuel, along with former state representative Mike Murphy, and UIndy political science professor, Dr. Laura Wilson. It's great to have you all with us. Laura, we saw the interview there with the governor-elect, certainly somebody who's got a lot on his plate right now, finishing up as a U.S. senator and making his plans for the transition in January to be the state's next governor.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think one of the things people are looking at is how much does he continue from Governor Holcomb's administration? How does he do things new? We heard him talk about having the 8 secretaries directly reporting to him. Makes sense in terms of his background as a business person. But I also think when you look at Katie Jenner continuing her role when she was appointed by Governor Eric Holcomb in 2021, that continuity can be really helpful. And to me, that shows that even though Braun might be taking a new approach in some elements, right, he recognizes the value of leadership and continuing on some of the things that Holcomb did as he's looking forward to his administration.
Mike, we know there's going to be a new state Republican chair as well, but what did you make of the decision Laura referenced there to keep Education Secretary Katie Jenner in place as he builds out his cabinet now with at least a few holdovers from the Holcomb administration?
Well, there are a few holdovers. Katie is one of the all-stars from the Holcomb administration. She was a natural pick to move forward. But some of the cabinet members, remember, he had probably 27 cabinet members, and dropping it down to 8, it's the first major reorganization of state government since Evan Bayh created FSSA back in the late 80s. It's really was due. But some of the cabinet members are going to lose their spot. They're still going to run an organization like maybe Chris Lowry at Higher Education. He'll be reporting to Katie Jenner instead of having a seat at the table.
A little bit of a restructuring. Robin, this week your party passed a new code of conduct after dealing with some of these recent harassment allegations, and also took time to respond to this Braun agenda that came out. House Leader Giaquinta said his caucus will, quote, work with the governor-elect to make Indiana the best state it can be and continue to hold Republicans responsible to deliver real results and not Band-Aid solutions to the problems Hoosiers are facing. What do you think? Is that the right approach for your party to take here in the new year?
Well, first off, it's pragmatic. I mean, you know, you have a supermajority in both houses. The governor won an overwhelming, or the governor-elect won an overwhelming campaign. I never want to cheer against Indiana. I think we should be cheering for the future of our state. When they do the right things for Indiana, we should be supportive. When they're on the wrong track, we should always compare and contrast and talk about it.
Tony, you heard both Braun and also Congressman-elect Shreve answer this question about immigration and the agriculture industry pretty much the same way, that they may be open to some carve-outs for the ag industry when it comes to keeping some migrant workers in place. So is it really practical, all this talk about mass deportation at the federal level?
Well, it's practical, but there's going to be a structure to it, I believe. And when you're talking about deportations, you have to go, and President Trump will do this, after the worst criminals, the gang members first, and then anyone that's committed a crime. When you're doing that, you're protecting Americans, you're doing the right thing for public safety. President Trump campaigned on that. And, you know, after that, yes, people that came illegally should be on notice, but that's going to take a while, I think, to filter down to that level.
Mike, I want to get your thoughts on that as well. Where do you see Republicans landing on this issue, and also on tariffs, especially as we get sort of beyond the talking points and into some of these real-life practicalities and potential consequences of these more controversial agenda
first
items?
of all, when it comes to immigration, I've always had 2 standards, 2 thresholds. One is it has to be constitutional, and it has to be humane. As long as it does those 2 things and following the rule of law is perfect. Now, if you look at the Heritage Foundation or the Heritage Group's writings, just 3 days ago came out with a whole 20-page paper about how they're going to take people with student visas, and if they get caught protesting in favor of Hamas, they're going to be thrown out of the country. I don't know if that's legal or not, but we'll see.
Immigration among the topics, by the way, that Ball State's recent Hoosier survey just inquired about. Half of Hoosiers who responded say they are happy with the current level of legal immigration, as you'll see here on this graphic, including some who say they want more legal immigration. As for what voters want to see the incoming governor accomplish during his first term, well, the number one thing that you see there on that list, school safety, along with health care, public safety, and then also school choice. A majority agreeing with the governor-elect's focus on expanding school choice. Meantime, about half of the people surveyed said they would rate Indiana as a good place to live as opposed to excellent or fair or poor. So, Laura, what do you make of some of those numbers in general as the new administration prepares to take office in the state?
Sure. I think it's interesting because you see a lot of congruence in terms of what the people want to see and what we expect to see in terms of policy. Specifically, when you talk about public safety, healthcare, but school safety, we saw an increase of $5 million in terms of the last budget with regards to specific school safety measures. And we've heard from Mike Braun, healthcare is going to be important, education is going to be important. So this is one of those times we can see the survey really reflecting what folks want and probably what government's going to do.
Okay, another big story this week at the national level, President Biden endorsing his own son, Hunter Biden. Tony, we asked Jefferson Shreve the question this way as well, whether it's Biden or Trump pardoning Ivanka's father-in-law and making him the ambassador to France. Should people just generally be more concerned about presidential powers being taken too far?
Well, I think with this one, because Hunter wasn't even sentenced. Ivanka's
preemptive pardon.
Right,
Case,
and it goes back to 2014. What this really is, it's covering any crime that he committed when he was working on, not working, but on the board of Burisma, not working at all because he wasn't qualified. In any of those, that corruption scandal that's out there, that's what this is really doing. The pardon over the tax issue is, I think, a smokescreen. The other difference is Ivanka's father-in-law, he served his sentence. Hunter hasn't even been sentenced.
Robin, what's your response to that? And what do you make of the calls from some, including James Clyburn, who suggested that he might support the idea of President Biden pardoning President Trump before he takes office? Biden also reportedly might be looking at pardoning some frequent Trump critics like Liz Cheney or others. Do you think we'll see any of that happen?
You know, Dan, remember a few years ago whenever they campaigned, their chant was lock them up. So they were already telegraphing to you where their thought process was on a lot of people, was put them in jail. Now look what happens. Now I want to see what happens because remember, he campaigned in a lot of places promising day one to release people that were convicted for January 6th. That's video of people kicking doors in, using hammers, fighting police. Let's see what happens there.
We'll see how it plays out. All right, coming up next, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg back in Indiana this past week. We'll tell you why straight ahead.